Hey guys, Andrew Ragas, Northwoods Bass Fishing Adventures. Wanted to talk to you all about baits that worked very well for the boat this year, and also a showcase of some of my favorite rods from the course of the 2022 fishing season. I don't have all the rods and sticks behind me, but the ones that I kept and have at home. These are the ones I'm going to showcase, the ones that I found the most applications for and certainly caught the most amount of fish with. They're all right behind me. So the first rod I'm going to showcase here is one of last year's favorites. This one here is the Victory Marshal 7-foot 3-inch medium heavy fast. So last year when I used this rod primarily, it was my rod of choice for Carolina rigging for largemouth, and then for throwing paddle tails and swim baits for smallmouth. So I kept this with the rod. It had a lot of applications. It was really good and I liked it. It was my favorite. But one thing that I've had trouble in deciphering and choosing for myself and for my needs and purposes is a good rod to sling and launch spinner baits with. I had always struggled with this. I could never find a rod that had just that suitable kick-ass, super strong backbone with a tip section that would give me a lot of flexibility, power, and sensitivity just to feel bites and then to drive those hooks home. And up until then, I'd been throwing primarily the Legend Tournament Bass spinnerbait models, the sweeper spinnerbait, and then the regular generic spinnerbait model. But with those rods, I found there was just too much whippiness to that tip section, and I'd really like a medium, heavy, fast, a solidly strong built rod to handle my spinnerbaits with. So with the Victory, I experimented with it in early season and it worked great, and all year long I finally got onto really good spinnerbait bites with this, and set the hooks into real nice fish. It's a pleasure to fish with, joy to cast with, and to really set the hooks into fish with also. So the spinnerbait of choice here that I really found and liked is the new sling blades from Z-Man Fishing, designed by Luke Clausen, and it has a really unique head shape and style. And what this does, you notice the 90-degree angle above the head, so it almost turns 90 degrees, and apparently what that does is it prevents the bait from rolling. So typically what happens to a lot of spinner baits is when they have that cone-shaped head, they tend to roll, they'll line twist, you're retrieving it and burning it through the subsurface or through the water column. The faster they go, the more they tend to blow out and roll over. And with the head shape, it's got like a StabiliTrak type of head shape, so water will pass right through underneath it, and with the placement of the wire, it runs true and straight at any retrieve speed. So this bait right here has been a favorite this year. I got onto a really good spinnerbait bite back in mid-September when smallmouth were finally moving up on those flats, and I was picking off fish really good in windy conditions in those types of lake areas across our sand flats. But this right here is the rod, the Marshal 7.3 medium heavy fast. I've got it spooled up with 15-pound Cortland camo mono, and I'm still a monofilament copolymer angler when it comes to fishing spinnerbaits or any bait really with treble hooks on it still. So this right here was a joy to fish with. So consider the 7'3" medium heavy fast Victory or the new Legend Tournament Bass for all your spinnerbait fishing needs. I think you'll like it too. Mainly for the backbone, but then also as well for the sensitivity, the hook setting power, and just the overall handles for working a spinnerbait too. It requires a lot of torque and power, a lot of force and friction then is going to be imparted on your reel too. So it requires specialized gear, at least for comfort and being able to withstand just all the forces going against the rod and the reel then during the retrieve. But the Victory Marshal, so this is a new spinnerbait stick. Really loved it. Next up, This one continues to be my all-time favorite, the Legend Glass 7.2 medium moderate. Unfortunately this year I did not get on any good crankbait bite. Early spring I totally missed out on that window. I was not on the water when it was going, and then by the time I got back fish were already spawning and then in post spawn. So I did not get on any good crank bite. I had no opportunity to fish the flowages or river systems at all this spring and then again in fall due to low water conditions. But this right here remains an awesome stick for smallmouth, especially working crankbaits such as the Rapala DT4, the DT6. If you want to do any lipless cranks with it also, it handles masterfully and wonderfully. But right here, for all your crankbait fishing needs, kind of see the specs. LBC72MM, the medium moderate. And also in the basement I have its bigger brother, the 7'4" heavy moderate. That one I use for deep divers. More power, bigger crankbaits, but for your smaller stuff, shallow divers to mid divers such as the DT6, this is a beautiful setup right here. And it remains a favorite. I still fish it often, even though I didn't get on a good crankbait bite this year like I did in past years. Works beautifully. This one saw a lot of usage throughout the year. The Mojo Bass Glass. This here is a 7'2" heavy moderate. So it's got the power. This is the Rip and Chatter series. Currently I have this wrapped up to cover a lipless crank that I had been working with in the fall. But what I primarily fish this rod with is chatterbaits and then lipless crankbaits. So it's my multi-purpose tool for largies and smallmouth. So chatterbaits, for instance, I'm going to be catching largemouth with it. And then for lipless cranks, early season largemouth, and then summer and fall smallies with lipless cranks. But this right here is the setup. And up until May of this year, I'd been fishing this setup mainly with fluorocarbon line. So 10, 12, 14 pound Seagar. I kind of got tired of it. I felt I was having too many line twist issues or just weakening of my knots and not being confident in working a chatterbait through vegetation or wooded areas. So with that, what I ended up doing was spooling up this 7:3:1 gear ratio reel with 20 pound Cortland master braid. It handles great. I have confidence, full confidence to fish a chatterbait through thick jungles, wood, stumps, trees, brush, any thick weeds. I can rip my baits through it no problem now with the braided line on there. And then in the event that I'm fishing clear water, wanting to run a lipless crank through, I do tie on a section of fluorocarbon leader, which I do have currently, just because I had been fishing this setup here for the last week and a half on clear bodies of water for smallies. So this setup is awesome. Lakes, rivers, flowages for smallies or largemouth. I do recommend the Rip and Chatter series. It's going to be your all-purpose rod, whether you want to throw a lipless crank or a chatterbait. But right here, it's a great rod, great workhorse rod. When I ordered my rods last year, just prior to winter, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, ordering all these long 7.5 to 8 foot rods, mainly the Victories. I didn't know how often I would get into fishing with frogs or flipping and pitching strategies, or just needing a heavy duty rod to launch big baits with and to just extract fish from heavy cover. But I'm glad I got this rod last spring, and for the first 2 months of my year I was fishing this one the most out of any of my other largemouth sticks, and that was just due to the location of fish, where they were in lakes, how I had to catch them, and where I was finding them. And so our weed growth was very low and down from ice out and end of April all through the month of May. So with no weeds, largemouth, they were locating in lakes that, you know, typically do get weeds but didn't have weeds yet this year. But what these lake locations did have an overabundance of was a lot of wood, stumps, flooded undergrowth, and that's where these largemouth that I was catching in for the first 5-6 weeks of the year, that's where they were at. And to get at them, I had to throw the Victory flipping rod. This here is a 7-foot 3-inch heavy power, moderate fast action. So what I have it spooled up or paired up with is an old school Quantum Accurist, the Accurist PT500 with the flip and switch. Old school, I'm talking, this reel is 20 years old. And what I have it spooled up with is 30-pound Cortland master braid. And in the event that I was fishing thicker stuff, I have another reel of these, but the newer edition of the Tour Edition with flip and switch. And on that one, I have Cortland Silent Flip, 50 pounds spooled up on that reel. But early season, if all you're dealing with is just wood cover, not a mess of jungle, no thick weeds, you can certainly get by with flipping and pitching with only 30-pound braid like I did. But this is a great rod and reel setup for pitching and flipping. I'm very used to it, and I did showcase this setup extensively when we filmed largemouth bass right after Memorial Day weekend. We shot an episode for Midwest Outdoors, and all of our strategies that day, we were either shooting docks or pitching and flipping into flooded brush or wood, and that's where we were finding all of our largemouths at in early season. So right here, as you can see, I got my flipping tube, my setup from earlier in the spring, all set up on this, and I'll probably keep it on there for next spring. So this worked very well. So the Victory flipping, 7'3", heavy, moderate, fast. And you can see the specs right there. Great setup, very smooth, very fun to fish with. Great for extraction, and it does help if you're casting reel like mine, if it does have that flip and switch. Show right there, it's kind of, the camera's showing a little awkwardly from my angle. So right there I have the flip and switch engaged. This does help if your reel has a flip and switch. You'll be able to do the job much more thoroughly, smoother, and efficiently. And that's it. Great setup for largemouth right here. And first, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of the year, I was catching all my largemouth pitching and flipping. Did it get boring and tiring? Yeah, it got kind of boring doing that on a daily basis when I did go for largemouth, but the nice thing about it, every lake fishes differently. Every lake has a different set of habitat that the fish use, and the same flipping tube that I have on here isn't going to work on every largemouth lake. So on some lakes they wanted either a creature hog, others just wanted a simple tube like that. So mix and match. But that setup right there works with any soft plastic or any jig as well. And I used it a lot. It was fun rod to fish with. As many of you know, the best high-end rod that I like and own is the Legend Elite, the 7-foot medium heavy fast, the AVS70MHF. This one is my favorite. I have 2 of them that I use for smallmouth. So any jig application, whether I'm running tubes or want to crack a football jig along the bottom or something, some bottom bait, I recommend a 7-foot medium heavy fast. Only reason being is the strong backbone, which you need for big powerful hook sets. On any 20-incher, whether you're on deep water or fishing a hog pen where fish are big, they're going to school you if you're fishing underpowered rod and reel and line. And we've had it happen before on medium action gear, medium light. So big fish, big powerful fish, they require the adequate setup right here. So the Legend Elite, this is a rod you're going to have for life. It's that type of a rod. Very luxurious. The sensitivity and the power is outstanding. It's so lightweight. This rod is just a joy to fish with, and it goes everywhere with me right here. So right there, Legend Elite. This here is my all-purpose, my do-it-all. This is the Avid 7-foot medium heavy fast spinning. I use everything on this setup, whether I'm fishing for largemouth or smallmouth, throwing paddle tails, a topwater, a crankbait of some sort. And if I want to fish it on a spinning setup, this is it right here. I can do everything with this rod combo. I even use it for pike fishing. I use it for walleyes. Fish of all species, no matter the presentation, I can catch them on this setup. It's like my Swiss Army knife of rods right here. What I like the most about the Avid, it's not your high-end type of rod that you need to meticulously care for like the Legend Elite. But what I like about it is its workhorse attitude. It's not the flashiest rod. It's not the most expensive rod either that you'll own. But what it does have is the durability, the strength, and the action. And it's going to get the job done for you, no matter the presentation that you're doing for smallmouth or largemouth. And continues to be my favorite rod for 3 years in a row right here. So the Avid AVS70 medium heavy fast. Great setup. I have it paired up with the size 30 Quantum PT, spooled with 15-pound Cortland Master braid. And this right here is a great setup. I got my hands on this bad boy last year for the first time, and I absolutely loved it for my Ned rigging system, the AR rig. But this year, obviously, in partnership with Z-Man, I started fishing microscopic size Ned rigs with it, and let me tell you, it works great for those as well. It's got the sensitivity in the backbone. This here is the 7'1" medium fast Victory, the Finesse series, the 7'1". So backbone wise, it's got the power of a medium heavy fast, but tip wise, I would say it has the action and flex of, say, a medium light. This right here is the flex of it. What I often tell folks is, you know, if you're familiar with the ugly sticks in fishing, how whippy they are, the Victory is very similar to that, and that's what I actually like about the Victory. Each of these sticks, they're built and very renowned for the strong backbone, but what I really like is the sensitivity and how they've created these rods so it has that faster tip action and flex. So this is an aid if you're jigging, you're fishing deep, or if you're casting, and a lot of your strikes are going to happen out in long distance where you need a good strong rod to be able to jack those fish and get a good hook set from afar. So that's where the tip action is awesome. Having that flex is awesome for instances like this. So the price point on the Victories is about $200, but in the event you wanted something just as nice but better quality and a slight upgrade, I would recommend the Legend Tournament Bass Versatile, which is also a 7'1" medium fast. The only difference being with the Legend Tournament Bass Series is a bit more sensitivity, but just like the Victory, what I like about it is the backbone and also the tip flex. But it might be a slightly stronger rod in my opinion. But this rod, outstanding. And the only thing that you'll have to get used to if you're not used to reeling in a rod, I know a lot of guys, you know, they just like holding a rod like that, but, you know, with its bottom grip, it doesn't really work well this way. So you have to be a user of the foregrip like this, the way I like to rig and hold my rods too. But fish this way, I tend to work all my spinning setups just like that. So it's a good handle, works well, and it just fits me right. But this here is the setup. The Victory Finesse 7'1" medium fast. So for my last two rods, we've got the grand finale, and when I made my order right when they were all released last spring, I didn't really know what I was going to get myself into with these two rods. So thankfully they were available, but I just didn't know like what application we would have with them in my boat once we got them. But the timing was right, because once we started fishing these two in September, it was already paddle tail and swim bait time. So that's the way I like to operate during that month. And these two rods were absolutely gorgeous beauties to fish with. And you know, I'm keeping them for next year and for the years after, and they're great rods. So what I have here, I've got two of them. So this is the two models here that I have are the Legend Tournament Bass, the Power Finesse, which is a 7'3" heavy extra fast action. And then this right here is the Warhorse, the 7'5" medium heavy fast. So when I got the 7'3", my whole intention with it was, all right, maybe let's use it for swim jigs or some spinner baiting. Just because at that point when I made the order, I really had no idea what I couldn't find that perfect spinnerbait rod until I settled for the Marshal Victory. But even though this one here is kind of not really marketed for paddle tails and swim baits, it just worked great, and it has that same action that I like out of the Victory Marshal. So the specs on this one is the 7'3" heavy extra fast, the Power Finesse. So it's able to support 3/8 to 7/8 ounce baits. What I have on here is the 1/2 ounce swim bait paddle tail, the FT series swim bait head with a 3.8 inch striking rage swimmer. I did fish this with swim jigs and spinner baits for largemouth, so it is very adequate, but what I really liked about it was just the response from smallmouth that we were getting on the setup, the hook setting power. Some of my anglers last September, a lot of their big fish that they were catching was actually towards the tail end of the retrieve, and some of those fish were actually hitting near the boat. So what we tend to do is if we're seeing fish chasing us but they're not committing, so they've got that behavior, the chase mentality of a muskie where they're just following you back to the boat and then they don't strike until the lure is near boat. That was happening a lot with the 7'3" setup. So John Pelletier, he's my angler who caught the 21.5 incher in mid-September. That one was our biggest smallmouth of the year lengthwise, and probably at full body weight shape too. That fish is definitely a 6-pounder at peak season. He caught his big one on this setup, just doing a figure 8 near the boat, and that strike happened with half of his rod still in the water. So he was just very alert and attentive to what was going down, and he caught that fish with the setup, and that tended to happen throughout much of the fall season. Then on some days, my anglers, they were so enamored by the 7'3" model that they wanted to buy it off of me at the end of the day. But St. Croix has a number of these in stock. So great setup. I did not use this rod to its fullest potential for largemouth the way I wanted to, whether it was for throwing a swim bait or a spinner bait or a swim jig, but for the paddle tail and for my search methods, it worked very well. So setup here I have is an old Quantum Icon PT spooled with 20-pound Cortland master braid, 7.01 gear ratio. A good multi-purpose setup and stick right here, and I really like this rod too. I was fishing it a lot as well when it wasn't a guide trip day. So here it is right here, 7'3". And now the last one here is its slightly longer brother by 2 inches. This here is the Warhorse, the 7'5" medium heavy fast. So it's got the same backbone and the same butt and ass end of the Power and Finesse one, but it's got the extra 2 inches here. So it's a bit of a downgrade in power, just slightly, medium heavy fast, but the extra 2 inches in length more than makes up for it in terms of power, the castability. These two setups here, in comparison, very similar. You're going to get the pretty much identical casting length and distance, except it's a bit easier to cast with that slightly longer rod, the 7'5" model. And the extra 2 inches, it's great for hook sets from afar. Oftentimes with my swimmers, you're either going to get bit near the boat or somewhere mid-retrieve, or most commonly it's going to happen as soon as that bait lands wherever you just launched it to. Within 1 or 2 cranks, and you're going to get slammed, and that's very common with the bomb casting methods here that I really like to do. But This rod, I was primarily throwing it myself. Really no one else in my boat was throwing the 7'5", but I think next year, having a full season with this and then the Power Finesse, I think we're going to have a great year and a great time with these two. So that's all I can say about these two rods. They're beauties. Absolutely love them. Up until this year, I had been operating the same way with two of the Victory Series rods, the Marshal and the Max Marshal. The Marshal's a 7'3", medium heavy fast. The Max Marshal's a 7'5", medium heavy fast. I still have those rods, both of them, but for a slight upgrade, more sensitivity, a bit more power, I'd say, are in these Legend Tournament bass. It's well worth the extra cost, these two. But all four rods, all four casting rods I just described, I use them always. They're my favorites for this style of fishing, and then for any type of power fishing with search lures. Can't beat it. So if anyone has questions on these two models, I talk about them extensively in my one new current article, Top Smallmouth Bass Baits of 2022. I'm also going to have a piece about 10 rods for 10 more bass jobs. Some of these rods are going to be highlighted and showcased in that article too. But this right here, these two sticks here, they got the job done this September and October. Caught a lot of big fish with them, and I don't think we would have caught some of our biggest fish if it weren't for these two rods. I'm that confident about them and their performance and how they fared for my anglers and then for myself too. So definitely check them out. They're great. So the rods I just showcased, just paints a slight picture for what worked great this year. Obviously, I don't have all my rods with me here in the office. These are just what I had and what I can showcase to you now. But each rod, have confidence that it's the right rod for you and the way that you want to fish. Even though my methodology of throwing swim baits is with like a 7'3" medium heavy extra fast or 7'5" medium heavy fast, that style of fishing might not apply for you and for what your preferences are. So even though a certain St. Croix fishing rod is marketed to a certain specific style of fishing, just know that that rod can also be applicable to however your preference in fishing is, and your styles and the methodologies that you really like to employ too. So that's what I found with a lot of these bass rods that I have. Even though it's marketed for a specific purpose in the label of the rod and then for what its design and intentions is for, I found other applications that a lot of these rods are great for. So that's just an example too. So that's the joy in tinkering with rods, testing them, using them, and then ultimately when you find the perfect match and strategy for that rod and you're having success with it, that's what makes it so enjoyable and so fun for fishing too. So that gives you the engagement, and that's what makes it fun ultimately too. So who knows what I'll order for next year. I haven't made my order yet, but I do imagine that I'll find some creativity and I'll find a rod that's a winner for however I want to fish. And if I find a successful method for next year, then that rod's going to be a winner and it's going to work well too. So in the coming weeks and months, if anyone has questions about rods, specifics, the specifications and my thoughts and opinions and feelings on that rod, don't hesitate to ask me and I'll do my best to answer your questions and hopefully help you make an educated choice and decision in your next rod purchases. So these here are my winners, and hopefully you can tell me what yours are too, and I'd appreciate listening to that. Thanks, guys.